Nothing that we're saying here today is going to change the evidence. Nothing we're saying here today is going to change the law. If we're correct, and we believe we are as to what we've said so far, the evidence that you have seen and the evidence that we have reason to believe that exists is in the possession of the prosecutor and law enforcement, taken together and applied to the law. We frankly believe that the correct decision will be to not charge him.
George Zimmerman's former attorney says their statement today will not influence a potential case against Zimmerman. But at the same time, they called George Zimmerman's mental well-being into question.
Our concern is that for him to do this, when he's got a couple of professionals out there working as hard as we were for his benefit, to handle it this way suggests that he may not be in complete control of what's going on. We're concerned for his emotional and physical safety.
In another surprising revelation, attorney Hal Uhrig said the lawyers never met face-to-face with their client.
Probably in 99.44%, 100% of the cases, you meet with your client, you sign a representation agreement, you represent them after that. However, for attorneys that practice here in Central Florida, with 54 million tourists a year coming to Disney and Universal and oftentimes getting arrested and flying home and hiring us from Minnesota or from California or from Europe, it is not totally unusual to not meet with your client personally. We do it all the time.
Let's bring in John Butchko, a retired Miami Police Department homicide detective. John, good to have you with us tonight. As an investigator, did the attorney's statements impact a potential case against George Zimmerman from what you can see?
Well, it's a pleasure being here. No, from what I can see by their statements, what they say really means nothing to the case, especially what they're saying to the media and during these press conferences. However, should he be charged and should this case go before a jury, by saying those exact words in front of a jury could influence that jury to find the defendant not guilty. However, the case is going to be based on the physical evidence, on the angles of the shot, the injuries to Mr. Zimmerman, and a variety of other information which will be important to a jury. Defense lawyers all the time will talk about a case in front of a jury. They'll tell the jury some things that are not true, and they'll try to discredit the police officers on a stand and go from there. So it will mean something in front of a jury, but not here in the media.
Let's bring back Mike Papantonio, attorney and host of Ring of Fire radio show, and also Dan Gelber, former Florida State Senator and former federal prosecutor. Gentlemen, the story tonight now is that the prosecuting investigator is going to hold a press conference within the next 72 hours to release new information. Mike, your response to that?
Well, it's all adding up to where there's really a real potential. It's hard to read tea leaves other than to say that I think there's probably going to be an indictment. I say that because this is a prosecutor who said we don't need a grand jury. I have the facts in front of me. They've looked at the facts. She's very capable. I would be amazed if there's not some indictment that comes out. I'm sure this is a prosecutor that's also concerned about the public relations circus that's taken place here, and she feels like she has to get out there. She has to say, look, hold on, I've looked at it. In 72 hours, I'm going to give you an answer to maybe calm this three-ring circus down just a little bit. I think that's probably what's at work here.
Dan, your thoughts on this? When the 72 hours, isn't it rather strange that you would put a time frame on when she's going to release new information?
Well, it's going to create a lot of anticipation and even more scrutiny and interest. In this case, though, there's so much of it, it may not matter either way. But I do think, however, that, and talking to Mike's point, look, there's no question this is going to be a tough case if it's brought. But if she believes that this guy committed a crime, then she ought to bring the charges, even if it's a tough case. There's no reason not to bring a tough case if you believe and are convinced that there's been a crime. And I think she may be leaning that way just based on some of the things that we've been hearing and seeing.
I got to ask you, Mr. Butchko, as an investigator, now that George Zimmerman has spoken to someone who happens to have a radio and a television show, wouldn't that take the prosecutors or the investigators right to that host to ask him some questions? I mean, he's not bound by any attorney-client information. He could be withholding some information. Who knows? Wouldn't you want to interview him?
That's right. And any information that George Zimmerman gives to anyone other than his attorneys is information that the prosecutors could gather. You would serve a subpoena to whoever this person is, bring them in, and interview them as to what was said to them by Mr. Zimmerman, and that information could be used against Mr. Zimmerman or in his favor, on the other hand.
And Mike, earlier today, the attorneys for Zimmerman said that they apparently contacted Hannity and he wouldn't tell them what the conversation was about. What do you make of that?
Yeah. First of all, these are very capable criminal defense attorneys. Have they done a little more? Have they said more than I would want them to say? The answer is yes. But the very fact, this is all about Hannity. See, Hannity at this point could not care less about Zimmerman. This is about Hannity. Hannity has taken this thing as a terrible tragedy. He's turned it toward it being a Sean Hannity story, which is very characteristic of Sean Hannity. In the process, what he's done is he's prejudiced he's prejudiced Zimmerman for sure. In the end, you're going to see the polarizing effect of a guy like Hannity has big ramifications. It has big legs. I don't care how hard you try to pick a fair and impartial jury. He's very polarizing. You want to go in, as I said, with a neutral story. You don't want a guy like Hannity, who is a loose cannon, trying to try this case in the public, not for Zimmerman, Ed, but for Fox News and for Hannity.
All right. John Butchko, Mike Papantonio, Dan Gelber, thanks for your time tonight. Appreciate it.